This presentation is going to take you through the final question on paper 3 for Weimar and Nazi Germany. That's the 20-mark question, so this is a very important question and does carry a significant amount of marks on this paper. So it's building on all of the interpretations questions that you've looked at over question 3B, C, and now D is the essay question. How far do you agree with interpretation? It can be 1 or 2, in this case interpretation 2, about the reasons for the growth and support for the Nazi Party. So that will be the stem that is different in the exam, something that is specific to a topic area and inquiry focus. That is the great unknown in terms of the final exam paper. But you will have an idea of that subject area because you'll have looked at 2 interpretations, you'll have looked at 2 sources. But the most important thing is that you do not get bogged down with that you apply your own knowledge of the historical context. I'm going to just talk to you about how you do that in this presentation. Okay, now thinking about what a good answer is going to include here, there's got to be a focused explanation of agreement and challenge. So regardless of your opinion and whether you do agree with the interpretation or not, you must structure a balanced answer for this question. So go with a structure I'll advise in a second. Make sure there's a logical argument that runs through the answer as well. Excellent knowledge and understanding is going to help. So if you've done your revision, you're going to be able to apply that specific knowledge with that historical context to support the arguments. You know, it's all about using Peel skills here to keep that focus so precise on the question, but it's about using the interpretations well to kind of have that precise analysis on them as also. And then when it comes to the overall judgment, make sure you explain it, support it well, justify it, and that'll give you a good mark for judgment also. Okay, so looking at the interpretations, we've seen these already for questions 3B and 3C. So you've already, for 4 marks, explored how the interpretations are different. Hitler's central role to the growth support of Nazis versus the Depression. Now it's a case of building an argument for and against the view that interpretation 2 has the viewpoint that the Depression was the defining factor within that. So here's your recommended structure for this question. What you should be looking for really is a minimum of 2 main body paragraphs with a conclusion. You can break those main body paragraphs up if you wish. You may go for 1 paragraph to agree with the interpretation and then 2 to disagree with it. You can be flexible on that, but what you must do is make sure that you state the view given in the interpretation first. Well, obviously it's interpretation 2 in this particular case because that's the question demands, and then use evidence from the interpretation to kind of like link it to the specific focus of the question. Then that's where you bring in your own knowledge. You agree with it, even if you don't agree with that particular viewpoint. Use your knowledge to explain that clearly and how it supports the interpretation. Then you provide the counter argument to disagree with the view that's given in the interpretation. Use evidence from the other interpretation to do that and link it to the question, and then bring in your own knowledge to disagree with interpretation 2 again, and then that leads you into your final judgment. So some people might find it easier with this question to go 1 paragraph, interpretation 2, 2nd paragraph, own knowledge, 3rd paragraph, interpretation 1, contrasting with interpretation 2, 4th paragraph, own knowledge, and then obviously the conclusion at the end. So there's 5 paragraphs in total. However, a very skillful answer might incorporate that all in together, as the example follows. Okay, so if we have a look at this as an example of how you can merge the interpretation with your own knowledge, you'll see from the first two sentences are exploring the interpretation and the viewpoint expressed in that, which is that the Wall Street crash and depression were central to growth and support of the Nazi Party. And there's just a reference to where the interpretation supports this by suggesting that before the Wall Street crash, the Nazis were only a minor party, and the depression and unemployment led people to support them. Now, building up from that, you'll be able to see them from my own knowledge. It's kind of like nice little segue in there to make the examiner kind of very aware you're about to bring in your own knowledge. You don't have to be as deliberate as that, but you can if it helps you. But the key is the specific details. So note that there's an understanding of key dates here. 1928, only 2.5% of the vote, and then as a result of the Wall Street crash and the onset of the Depression, 6 million Germans were out of work and in extreme poverty. Developing that on, then the government made mistakes which sent voters to extreme parties. Instead of spending money, they were committed to spending less, controlling inflation, so cuts were made to wages and unemployment benefits. So there's kind of clear knowledge of the impact and effect of the Depression in there. And then obviously that is the analysis starts to come in afterwards. This made the government deeply unpopular, and then this transforms the fortunes of the party. And it's a really important one to know in terms of Hitler's rise to power, how they go from just 12 seats in 28 to 230 in July of 1932, catapulting the party to the most popular party in Germany at that point. So that clearly supports the view that the Depression was the catalyst for growth and support of the Nazi Party, thus emphasising the validity of interpretation to notice that link back to the question there. So there's that kind of bit of analysis and link to the question where you see in a good Peel paragraph. Then we're going to counter that and look at the argument against interpretation 2. I'm going to use interpretation 1 here to challenge this view. So this focuses upon Hitler's playing the central role in the success of the Nazis. Again, this is supported with reference to the charismatic leadership of Hitler and his skills as a speaker, the focus of the interpretation. Contrasts to that of interpretation 2 by demonstrating that it was Hitler's ability to connect with the German people and give them hope. So what we have here is that clear contrast between interpretations, and that's a really good thing to do in this answer, is because you're showing that precise analysis of the interpretations there at that particular juncture in your answer. Again, now we've got to build in some of our own knowledge, there's clear evidence to support this. There's a little connected there that can bring in my own knowledge. And then we've got organisation of the party after the failed putsch, use of Mein Kampf to spread the vision of the Nazi Party, use of Goebbels as head of propaganda, use of modern technology, radio, huge rallies, Hitler knew how to strike the right tone, and then not just making broad statements here, is what he actually says that's crucial. Reference to the November criminals who stabbed Germany in the back by signing the Treaty of Versailles. Many people make the error here of just making broad statements about Hitler was a great speaker, but they don't actually make any reference to what he said. And it's really good knowledge and understanding when you can make specific references like that. So that kind of like analysis then towards the end of the argument. So although interpretation 2 offers a valid argument that the Depression was the more important factor, it's clear that it took a special person to capitalise upon this, something no other political leader in Germany could manage, therefore demonstrating the significance of Hitler overall. So that you've got that real critical analysis there of the fact that Hitler was able to drive the Nazi Party forwards. So then just to come to a conclusion, make sure that you weigh it up. So when whatever your opinion, and it's totally valid to argue that the Depression was the most important factor, and therefore you agree with interpretation 2. And if that's the case, then you would just argue that even though interpretation 1 is right in Hitler being important, ultimately it must be argued. And that's a really kind of useful thing to do here when it gets to your judgment. Weigh your overall opinion up against the counter argument. So even though interpretation 2 is absolutely right in its assessment that the Depression did play a crucial role in transforming the fortunes of the party, it must be argued that the relentless energy of Hitler and the Nazi Party was essential to take advantage of this chance event. Therefore, interpretation 2 is only partially agreeable. So I'm evaluating there with that statement of measurement of partially agreeable. And that's pretty much how you go about your answer for question 3D. As you said, looking at a very strong answer here. Anything in level 3, level 4 is going to have good analysis of the interpretations, precise analysis of the interpretations. There's a substantiated judgment that's in there as well. And then you've got this relevant contextual knowledge is precisely selected. Relevant contextual knowledge is directly used. So it's it's all about that level of knowledge that you deploy of your own is going to propel, is going to push your answer into level 3 and level 4. But if you follow the structure that's just been advised there, and you go into depth with this answer, and you make sure you leave yourself time, because it's worth 20 marks, then you can go into that depth with your response. Don't just make superficial comments, precise analysis of the sources, and make sure you link back to the question throughout. Peel paragraphs. That's the key to it. So that's question 3D.